Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the 2023 Louisiana Project Grants. This is the second year of the name of it being called the Louisiana Project Grants. Previously, it was known as the Decentralized Arts Grant Program, which I'll get into a little bit later. But I just want to go ahead and start off with the timeline here of things. So the application just opened last Monday on the 16th. The applications are going to be due on July 1st. We'll have our grant panel review the applications and score them and leave their comments and make their recommendations between July 12th and August 11th. And then I'll have a discussion with each group where they make those recommendations which will be August 9th through August 11th. Between August 15th or just the week of August 15th is when I'll be sending out those notifications as far as if you were recommended or not. And you'll have a period to reach out if you do have any questions in the event that the panelists did not recommend your application to be funded. If you are recommended, there's going to be a grant contract that's going to be sent out to you. You'll have about a month to finish that and upload it through Submittable. The grants activity period is between October 1st, 2022 and September 30th, 2023. So if you're looking for funding for a project outside of this grant activity, unfortunately, you won't be able to use this grant for that. It has to be between this grant activity period date. And then there'll be a final report that you would submit next year. So us being the Arts Council, we are the Arts Council. We are a regional Arts Council as well for Jefferson, Orleans, and Plaquemines parishes. So with that said, whenever you do get ready to apply for the grant, just make sure that you are selecting the correct region for wherever you're domiciled at. So essentially, this grant program is open to all artists and arts organizations and government entities throughout Louisiana. You just need to make sure that you're applying in the correct region. So just a little about the Louisiana Project Grants. As I mentioned earlier, it's formerly known as the Decentralized Arts Funding Program. The goal of this program is to provide a system for funding arts projects in all regions of the state by giving artists, nonprofit arts organizations, nonprofit arts organizations, nonprofit organizations, public and private schools, and local government agencies in each region the opportunity to develop arts projects that meet their local needs. So the artistic disciplines that would be qualified would be in dance, design, folk life, literature, media, music, theater, visual arts and crafts, and things of that nature. So there is more information in the guidelines. That is something I also just highly recommend that you just make sure you look through and make sure that you are in fact eligible before you do spend any time filling out the application. But just making sure that you are applying in the region where you are domiciled and incorporated in. The difference between the Louisiana Project Grant and the Decentralized Arts Funding, the state did make a few changes. This video here is on our website, so I can share that link with you guys if you would like. Just reach out to me. But the DAF program essentially was for organizational support, but they've changed it to where they now have a general operating support program, which I'm sure some of you have probably applied for. That is a separate program that we don't administer or manage. We just manage the Louisiana Project Grant program. So the Project Grant program funds art projects. So there is a renewed focus on this program, which we'll talk a little bit about later, as well as the state went from allocating dollars by parish to it being more of a regional bound. Some things to consider, with you looking to get support for your arts project, and some things that the grant does not fund. These are just some things here that it doesn't fund, but again, I would just reference the pages 5 and 6 in the guidelines handbook to just confirm that list and making sure that you're not including any of these things within your proposal. All right. So here is the new focus and intent for the state. These are just things to keep in mind when you are writing your proposal, that this is what they essentially want the panelists to take into consideration when they're reviewing your application. So the project grant program goals is diversity, equity, inclusion. It stimulates healthy competition in grant proposal submissions. It's looking to increase the level of creativity, innovation, and awareness of new trends and project development, encourage professional artists to undertake projects that have meaningful community involvement and collaboration, and also leverage additional local and national support for the arts in Louisiana. So these are the priorities that the state is considering, which is it must be an art project involving dance, design arts, folk life, literature, media, music, theater, or visual arts. It must show how the project accounts for the population of the region and promotes diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, emphasis on innovation and artistry, risk-taking and trying something new, focus on learning as an outcome as well as quantitative outcomes, cross-parish partnerships between larger urban organizations and their rural counterparts or vice versa, and projects that have a trajectory to continue to enhance the region beyond the funding period. So your proposal doesn't have to touch on every single point, listed here. These are just the priorities that the state is, looking at as far as the types of projects that they're looking to fund. As far as the eligibility goes, the number one eligibility is that, of course, you have to be domiciled in Louisiana. And so, again, just making sure that you are applying within Region 1 if you're domiciled in Orleans, Plaquemines, or Jefferson parishes. So artists, nonprofit organizations, whether it's arts or non-arts, public and private schools and local government agencies are eligible to apply. If you're a nonprofit, you must be in good standing with the Louisiana Secretary of State in order to be eligible. Local, parish, or state governmental agencies such as libraries or municipalities are eligible and are not required to submit proof of nonprofit status. For organizations or entities who lack legal status to be an applicant may apply using an eligible nonprofit organization to be a fiscal sponsor. So an organization can fiscally sponsor up to 2 other individuals or entities. In addition to that, fiscal sponsor can also apply for a project themselves. So they can essentially submit 3 applications as long as it's different for different projects. It can't be for the same project. It has to be for different projects. So you can fiscally sponsor up to 2 additional artists, individuals, or organizations who don't have that 501c or that nonprofit status yet. 2 very important things to keep in mind that you should also consider before you do apply is that there is a cash match. This is something new to the program that they've added. So as of last year, the cash match is something new that they've added. So whatever grant amount that you do request, which the request is going to range between $2,500 and $7,500, whatever that amount is, just make sure that you can show in your budget that you have at least a 50% cash match for that. So in the guidelines, it does have kind of a list of what funding sources are not eligible for cash match. For example, like other federal grants, you can't use towards the cash match. You can include in your budget, but it can be used towards the cash match. And I know that was kind of a problem with applicants from last year is that there was a good bit of applicants who, I guess to some extent didn't really read throughout the whole guidelines and missed the cash match part. So it's like, you'll have this great proposal, but in your budget, if you're not reflecting where other sources of money is coming from to show there's going to be, a cash match there, then your application is not going to be eligible, at least for the money that you're requesting. If it's enough to show that, you might get approved for a different grant amount, that could be the case, but you just want to make sure whatever you're asking for, that you do have a 50% cash match for that. The second most important thing, which this is new as of this year, is that all applicants must have a UEI number. So if you're a nonprofit organization, if you're essentially any entity besides individual artists, you have to have a UEI number. And if you're an individual artist applying with the fiscal sponsor, you would just use the fiscal sponsor UEI number. So this is a number, it's short for Unique Entity Identifier. This is a new number that the federal government is now using. So they're no longer using the DUNS number. And so you would just go to sam.gov to register for that number. It's free, it's fairly quick to do, but I also know that other organizations have had some issues with, maybe information isn't matching with their SAM account, and so you might run into that issue. This is also another reason why I highly suggest that if you are going to apply, that you register for this number as soon as possible, because if you do run into issues with them, it may take some time. It might take a few weeks. They've been backed up because there's other organizations who have been struggling trying to get this number, but you will not be able to move forward with the application unless if you have this number. So I would suggest try like today, if just to, get the number, because for any federal grant that you want to apply for in the future, you have to have this number anyways. So just giving you guys fair warning. Did anybody have any questions so far?
I do, Ashley.
Yes.
When I looked at some of the criteria in working with a fiscal agent, I had thought that maybe I could apply through the Ogden. That's what I was trying to say earlier when I was breaking up.
Mhm.
But there's some criteria that seem to say that if that fiscal agent or funding source has gotten grants from elsewhere, then they're not able to be a fiscal agent for your project. And I'm saying it in one sentence, but it was a lot more information than that. So I'm not quite sure if you maybe understand what I'm saying, or know what I'm referring to, but maybe you do.
Let me see here.
Yeah. Da 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 da. Fiscal agent must be domiciled. All that is good. May not. Yeah, all that is good. But then it had some other line items, and maybe I'm jumping ahead. Maybe we'll just wait till you get to all that part.
Mhm. Let me see. As far
Oh,
as
oh, line item support from state legislature. Like maybe the Ogden would be getting line item support already from the state legislature. I'm not sure what that means.
okay, what part is that at? I'm just trying to find
See
it.
where it says ineligible applicants,
Yeah.
organizations receiving line item support from the state legislature, or regional arts councils, no. Past grant recipients, no. Da da da. So, like, what if they're already receiving funding from the state legislature, the Ogden? Then they would not be ineligible to work as my fiscal agent.
Well, I think with the sentence here, it says these organizations are ineligible to receive grants for arts programming related to those line items. So I think it's only if it's related to it versus in general. So if you're the project that you're doing to get 50 sponsored for is not related to that line item support, then you will be fine.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
I had a question about the SAMS.gov because that actually has been a headache of mine. And I was able to register for the number, but for whatever reason, when I try, it's just like a bureaucratic glitch. When I try and verify my identity with my license, I always get stuck on that. And so I have my number, but there's like 3 more pages of, like, I have a number, but there's like 3 more pages of steps for me to be deeper into it. So at this point, if I wanted to apply for a federal grant, I still have 3 more steps that I'm unable to do because it won't accept my license or something. So if we have, and obviously this is something I'm aware of and plan on fixing, but if we have the number, is that enough? Because just this is a real quick thing. It's coming up really quickly. Is that enough to apply with just that?
Yeah, I believe so. Because here it just says you must have the number. If you're already registered in the system, you just have to maintain it being active. So as long as you're registered in the system and you have the UEI number and you keep it active, you will be good.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
So I'm sorry. I actually wrote something in the chat, like that was my question, because I'm kind of curious. I'm working with the Bayou Culture Collaborative, and we want to do this art space research, art therapy project, communal, traveling to different, starting in New Orleans and going to different coastal communities. And so I know I can only do this in Orleans, Plaquemines, and St. Bernard, but if we want to go to the Pointe-au-Chien, do I have to write an additional grant through the Bayou region?
No, the project can take place outside of those parishes. You just have to apply with your being domiciled in region 1. You just make sure you apply in region 1. But I believe there's a part in the application where it'll ask all these, like check mark all the places where your project's going to take place or something like that. And so that's where
okay. Yeah, because our intention is to pay the cultural bearers that we're going to. That's the intention. So we weren't sure. We wanted to make sure if we go to Pointe-au-Chien, they would be paid. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Okay, so here is the evaluation criteria that the panelists are going to score your applications on. So 35% is going to go to artistic merit, 35% is going to go to need and impact, 20% is going to go into planning and design, and 10% is administration and budget. So just remembering grant request range, the grant request range that you'll have is between 2,500 and 7,500, and just making sure that you do have a cash match for whatever request that you're making. Here's just a screenshot of Submittable. So the grant application is on submittable.com. It's a very popular grant making and grant managing system. It's very user friendly to use. You do have to create an account. It's free. But once you create the account, you can actually start the application and save it if you need to get back to it. But this is just what it'll look like once you click on there. So just making sure, because you'll see the state has other grants on there, but just making sure you click the correct one, which is the FY23 Louisiana Project Grants. So as far as how funding decisions are made, there is a review panel that's put together. It's made up of people with just different backgrounds, ranging from arts education to visual arts and things like that. The panel groups are essentially split into 3 groups because this grant program does tend to get a lot of applications, and it is very, very highly competitive. last year the panelists decided to have less organizations to give bigger grant amounts. And so it's likely that, they may decide that same thing as well, just to make sure that, those grant amounts are making an impact and that those organizations are able to fulfill that project that they need support for. So it's broken up into 3 panel groups. One group, they will review applications that are related to performances, theater, dance, music, and multidisciplinary projects. Another panel group will review applications related to visual, folk life, literature, festival, design, and media. And then another panel group will review all arts education related applications. If there's any panelists that would have any kind of conflict of interest with any of the applicants, they sign a recusal sheet. And so they're recused from scoring on those particular applications. They are all going to review the applications on Submittable. So everything's going to be done online. And then we'll meet to discuss the results there. And it'll just be an opportunity for the panelists to discuss the applications and have those recommendations. So any of the applicants can reach out if they are interested in joining the meetings. So what happens if you are awarded? If you do get recommended by the panelists, there's going to be a award letter sent out to you. It's going to be sent through Submittable. So it's also important whenever if you don't have a Submittable account already, that you do save the login information, because everything's going to be done through there. And so if you do get recommended, you just want to make sure you still have access to your Submittable account and to that application. So just make sure you have your login information saved somewhere. After the award letters are sent out, you'll have the contracts that you'll sign and send back. The grant amount is you're gonna receive an initial payment after we receive the funds from the state and you've submitted your contract, your signed contract. You will get 75% of your grant funds, but just remember that you still have to spend 100% of your grant funds within that activity period. And whenever you submit your final report, you will be reimbursed to 25%. So just keep that in mind when it comes to planning out your project and, your budget and things like that, that you still do have to spend the full 100% of the grant. And you'll be reimbursed to 25% after you submit your final report next year. If there's any changes to the scope of your project, just make sure that you do email me about it, and that you do just send, any kind of invites or invitations to your projects that you're putting on. And we'll make sure to share that with just, the state, if anyone's able to come and check it out. Also, something else to remember in your marketing material, that you do include logos for support and credit. So that will be the Louisiana Division of the Arts logo, as well as the National Endowment for the Arts logo. The National Endowment of the Arts does fund this program for the state. And so you just want to make sure you include both of those logos, which can also be found on their website. And then also, with the final report that'll be due next year, just make sure that you keep track of any activities during that grant period related to your project and all your financial information, because that final report, it is going to ask for things like receipts and invoices and check copies, things like that that's related to the project. And so you just want to make sure you're keeping up with all that information, so it's a lot easier to fill out your final report when that time comes, versus kind of waiting last minute and having to scramble for things. So
I have another question, Ashley.
yes.
So in creating or obtaining the UEI number, it seems to want you to be an entity that is incorporated. Is that correct?
Yes. So the UEI, only entities like government entities, schools, private public schools, nonprofit organizations will have the UEI. For individual artists, because you have to use a fiscal sponsor, you would just use that fiscal sponsor's UEI. So it
Okay.
would be the Ogden's UEI essentially.
So what's the one that you said that we should apply for as soon as possible?
That would be the UEI.
Okay, but it doesn't apply in my case.
Right. And I'm sure the Ogden probably already has theirs.
Right. So, but somebody like Joanne at the Ashe would try
Yeah.
and get her number. She probably has it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Joanne.
So that brings up a question. If you were your particular nonprofit, you have a UEI and you're applying for this grant, you can apply for the grant and be a fiscal sponsor for someone else?
Mm-hmm. As long as it's not for the same project.
Okay.
Oh, wow. So
But
that's,
then that means as the fiscal sponsor, you have to take on all the responsibility of the.
Right. You have to still make sure that, you know, financially you're still able to do what you need to do. Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Mhm.
So I know my understanding is for NEA funding, you cannot restrict programming to BIPOC artists. It has to be able to serve everybody. Is that the same for this, or can we restrict this? Could we write a grant for something that's specifically for that only BIPOC artists are eligible for?
Well, this is still NEA funding. I'll email our contact and I'll follow up with you about that just to make sure, but it's still NEA funds. So I guess if that's how they usually are, then I don't imagine it being any different, but I'll reach out to her just to confirm.
Would it be helpful if I wrote that question in an email that you could pass on?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ashley, I'm sorry, I keep asking questions.
Go ahead.
So is there a liability to somebody acting as the fiscal agent? You know, so if Ashe applied on behalf of them and then I used them just pretending that as my fiscal or the Ogden, what is their liability? I mean, is that something that they have to seriously judge, or is it just kind of signing on the dotted line?
Yeah, I mean, you would have a contract with them. So I think that would just be established between you two, essentially, as long as they're fulfilling what the state has in the guidelines, which is, you know, I think it's like they can't charge more than $150 for a fiscal sponsor fee. It can't be more than 2. It can't be the same projects. They can't be hired as a service provider for these projects. Then, you know, they're good on the state's end, but outside of that, it would be between that agreement you have. Joanna, I see you jumped on a little later.
I'm so sorry. I'm probably going to end up watching this as a recording later. I apologize for being late. I got caught in an email flurry.
All good. Did you have any questions?
No, I just came to see what information I could get. So.
Awesome.
And Ashley, these guidelines are on the Arts Council's website, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. If there's not any more questions, you guys can definitely still reach out to me if you come up with anything else.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you give an example of the project 50-50 separation? So like if I'm writing it for, could you just give an example of how that would look to do it appropriately?
Yeah, so if you are requesting a grant for $3,000, the 50% cash match would be $1,500. And so you and your budget essentially will have to show, you know, money coming from somewhere else. Maybe it's ticket sales, maybe it's from other grant sources or anything like that. That shows that, you know, you are getting at least that 50% cash match or more.
But you want us to actually like write it in like 50% from y'all, 50% from us.
No, there's a form already that the state has on the application that you would download. It's like a project budget form.
Okay.
And so it's essentially because I'm the one who looks through all the applications before I assign it to the panelists. So it's not going to be literally mentioned. It's kind of just like based on your breakdown on your budget, that would be me determining, okay, I can see that you requested 3,000. Let's say your project budget is like for 20,000, and out of this, you anticipate 3,000 in ticket sales. It's like, okay, well, clearly seeing this, there's at least a 50% cash match there to the grant request that you're making. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Actually, let me ask you this question. I'm sorry, can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's say your organization has like a savings account, whatever. You can show that you have that 50% right now, right? Can you give a copy of that bank statement as proof of your 50% match?
Well, you wouldn't have to submit like a copy of the bank statement. It's really just how it's being reflected in the budget form. There's a portion on the budget form where, it asks for income and expenses. I would be looking at the income essentially. So the income on the state's budget form, project budget form, it already has like kind of individual breakdowns, like individual contributions, local government contributions, federal contributions, whatever that is. So that's essentially the number that I'm going by off for it to show that, that there's clearly a cash match there. So that's why I'm like, it's not going to be literally saying you have a cash match, but it's just going to be reflective in your income by just showing like, okay, there's a cash match here because they're getting money from other support, like another kind of grant or ticket sales or individual contributions. Like if you have a $5,000 individual donation that you mentioned on your project, it's like, okay, well, 5,000, I can clearly see there's at least a minimum cash match there to what you're requesting. Does that make sense?
So yeah, I have actually the same what Joanne said. So because we're mental health, it's art, but it's mental health. So, but we have like some donations. So that's how we like would match it that way. And like, how would we prove that?
Yeah, it's not really a matter of, you don't have to prove it outside of the income that the income sources that you're listing.
Okay.
So just because I've seen applications where, someone requests 7,500, but the income that they're getting is like maybe 3,000 or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, based on the income that you're getting here, I don't see a cash match for the grant request that you're making. Versus, in that income source, you're gonna list out all these different kind of incomes that you're getting. And based on that, it's easy to conclude that there's a cash match there. No matter where it's coming from, as long as the numbers are there, I can see that.
Right. I was thinking more of, and maybe I misread or I read something somewhere else, like for documentation on your final report. I was thinking it might be a deterrent for people who are taking a risk of selling tickets, and that's where their cash match is going to come from. That people might be concerned about, what if I don't sell enough tickets to make the reporting requirement. That's all. I was thinking of a way to help encourage people to go and take the risk.
Yeah, that is a good point though. It does mention it for the final report, so not so much for the application, but when the final report comes, because I haven't been able to see, I'm not able to see how the final report looks because the state creates it, but somewhere on there is probably going to ask to show something about a cash match, since that was a requirement. So yeah, you're right, as far as like saving something of your financial documents, just something that reflects that there was a cash match there. So I guess it's kind of set up to where you can't really apply and say you have a cash match, but then if you get funded and final report time comes and you actually can show that you got a cash match. So I guess that's why they put that there. There was somebody else had a question.
I was going to ask about just anticipated funds. So I'm sure I'm not the only one who's writing multiple grants at one time.
Mhm.
So if I feel like I may be approved for $3,500 from a grant, I may put it on this application, but it's not final that it's been approved. So
Mhm.
should we steer away from hopeful income streams and just, know what's bankable and
Mhm.
put that in?
Yeah, I think that's something I would suggest. If it's not guaranteed, then I think it is hard to kind of include that if you're not 100% sure.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So now that brings another question to me. What if maybe you're not 100% sure, but you've had conversations with the funder and you feel confident? Can you go ahead and apply and use that that grant that you feel is coming? And then if it doesn't come through, amend your application afterwards?
Well,
Because
even
I did see in there where it says if there changes happen that they have to contact you and make sure that you're documenting properly. Oh, sorry.
you're fine. Yeah, even if it doesn't go through, if you have other sources of income that can still show that there's a cash match, I wouldn't be worried about it. If this is something that you're relying on as a cash match, I think personally I would still be hesitant if it's not 100% sure. But if you are pretty confident that you're going to get that money, I think it's really going to be your call. Ultimately it's just about, at the end of, by the final report time, can you just show that there's just a cash match? And it may not even come from what you originally thought, which is fine as long as you can show it. Great. Anybody else? All right. Well, like I said, reach out if you have any other questions. I'm going to go ahead and work on uploading this video, and I'll send the email out to everyone once it's available.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you all,
Ashley.
and especially Ashley, obviously. Bye.
Bye.